Petra, John's going to call roll.
Okay.
John's going to call roll.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to call to order the September Planning Commission meeting for the town of Kiowa. And Mr. Taylor, will you call roll, please? Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
There.
Luke, can you hear us?
I can. I'm here.
Here, good.
Iowa.
Here.
Tennessee.
Here.
Okay.
Here.
Good, okay. Everyone's here. I'd like to start with the approval of the minutes for our last meeting. I'd like to have a motion to approve. And a second.
I'd like to have my name changed back to Ms. instead of Mr., please.
Okay.
I just had one question, if I may.
Yeah, we get a second. Do you want to-
Okay.
Sorry.
Do I have a second for approval of the minutes? Okay, now we'll have any comments or questions regarding those minutes.
I have a question.
Okay?
On the top of page 4, this has to do with the beach walker things. Mr. Taylor's, there's a word missing now that I see it. I think that there should be a said in there. Mr. Taylor said. I didn't catch that before.
Last paragraph.
Pardon?
Person's last paragraph.
Yes, Mr. Taylor said that no buildings have been approved. The approval goes through the town site plan review and approval process for non-single-family residential districts through all zoning standards, and that process is not commenced. He also indicated that potential planned development district is an option that would require planning commission approval. If property owners do not pursue planned development and proceed with by right plan, that will go through our normal site plan review process where the commission would not necessarily engage with what happens in the site. I just want to make sure we're clear on this. I went back to the October meeting when we first approved these plats, and I re-listened to the meeting. And Stephanie was giving your presentation, John. You weren't there. And she reinforced that this is a staff does this. But at one point, and it's around the 50-minute mark, if anyone wants to check it, then Chair Mr. Peterson asked specifically that when the buildings were done, that this would come before the commission, and Stephanie said at that point, yes. So there seemed to be a little bit of a conflict. I just want to be sure that we see that again, because that's what we indicated to the community, and I wasn't sure that the minutes were saying we might not see it again.
Or just for.
It said approval, you know, there seemed to be both sides of it expressed in the October meeting. First that, no, we won't see it for approval, and then when Mr. Peterson asked it directly, it was, yes, we will. So I'm unclear which, but things we had said to the community subsequently was that we would see it once the buildings came through.
I'll go back.
How do you all remember this?
I'll go back and review, but I just wanted to make sure, just to clear that if it goes through administratively site plan review, that's not a process that would come back before the commission. But if it's something else that would come back for the commission, we would bring that to you. But I'll go back and make sure, but just to clear, if it's a site plan review administration that doesn't require any additional scrutiny via BZA, et cetera, then that would not come back before you.
Because it seemed, when we talked about this in October and when we heard from community comments subsequently, that we were just approving the easements of the road and that we would get to approve the buildings again. That was my understanding, which you're telling me may be an error, but.
No, so site plan review is administrative approval. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. Site plan review is an administrative approval.
John, final plat is what they're talking about.
So if there's a plat, then plat comes to planning commission, but final approval for the building locations, that is administrative through site plan review. So the design of the buildings, those things are administrative review. Just wanted to make sure that that's clear.
Okay, thanks, John.
Just, I see some hesitation, so I
No,
just
go
want to
ahead.
make sure that
We'll talk more later.
the conversation of a plan unit plan development that has not surfaced to us. I think that's probably more so was in a lot more of the conversations at the time of a plan development being surfaced. We just have not seen that formally, but that is something that has been still in conversation, and that will definitely, if proposed, come before you for review.
And it would come before us if the plats were used for different uses, or something, different uses than.
So John, just as I recall, as I remember, so you're going to review it, the administrative review is going to do it. And then if it doesn't conform, whether a setback or a height or something, then it comes back to us because then it cannot be approved because it's not conforming.
So an exception to the rule or in that manner would not come before a planning commission. I would go before our board of zoning appeals. So like height or setback, something of that nature, those would be something the board of zoning appeals would review, not the planning commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comes in as development, we get.
Okay, any other comments regarding their June 7th minutes?
No comments.
Okay. All those in favor of approving, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Any public comments on things regarding our agenda today? Please, come state your name and. Absolutely.
Good afternoon. My name's Emma Berry. I'm with the Coastal Conservation League. I am the Communities and Transportation Project Manager. And I am here today because I wanted to voice the Conservation League's support of the proposed resolution before us today on today's agenda regarding the urban growth boundary. As growth pressures increase on all of the Sea Islands, I think we can agree there's a need to strike a balance between urban and rural areas and our natural resources. It is our position that the UGB is an important growth management tool that allows for responsible growth while also maintaining our rural lands and the character that comes with them. We appreciate the town of Kiowa Island's dedication to respecting the urban growth boundary, and we hope that this resolution before us today advances the formal four-way agreement between the town of Seabrook Island, town of Kiowa Island, Charleston County, and the city of Charleston to strengthen the urban growth boundary. The Conservation League believes that the resolution before you today is the first step towards achieving this goal. We're happy to offer our support to help advance this collaborative initiative amongst the Sea Islands. So thank you for your time today and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. John Zlogo with the Johns Island Task Force. Just like to reiterate what Emma said, is that basically the urban growth boundary, and you found, with what's happening on Seabrook, how important it is. Someone mentioned in the earlier meeting about not wanting it to look like Myrtle Beach, and certainly one of the things that's doing that is the urban growth boundary in terms of making sure that the rural area of Johns Island remains that way. If you can just imagine if what you see on Maybank Highway, if that extended all the way down here past Edenvale, past Plow Ground, all the way down here, it would be horrendous. And if you think you couldn't get out now, then you would never be able to get out, no matter how many bridges there were on these islands. So maintaining the urban growth boundary is key, and we hope you recommend to council to support that announcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. Moving on to old business, we have several items, of which Mr. Taylor will address both of them. First, the Kiowa Next update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. They're really short comments relatively to Kiowa Next. We just hosted a workshop. Just as for the record, we will bring back some revised edits and advance a second opportunity for us to continue the dialogue regarding the remaining 3 action items related to the goals that have been established so far. We've noted a lot of discussion that occurred today, and so we'll prepare some revised documents for your review and have a session scheduled sooner than later regarding to keep this momentum relative to today's conversation. So that's the only sort of substantive update regarding Kiowa Next. Regarding our tree preservation and landscape ordinance update, I do want to provide just a brief update that effort is continuing right now, and it's with staff to provide some edits back to our sub-work committee. 2 weeks ago, we met to review what I'm calling an initial kind of draft. And there were some substantive things from that particular draft to be added, particularly more so advancing towards the landscaping. There was a good framework established around tree preservation, but in this effort to continue towards, and I use the word beefing up or improving the landscape standards in addition to just tree preservation, the subcommittee wanted some more additional language. I'll let any of the subcommittee members share anything if they would like to, Dr. Curran or Ms. Hennessy, Mr. Iwan, if they wanted to add anything just on that status of it. But I'm working on getting that back to you all, so that's all there.
Yeah, we were surprised how much we had done. Yeah, John and his people did a great job of taking our discussions and formulating a first draft, and we were pretty comfortable with where we were on that time.
That's all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, and thank the members that have been on this tree ordinance subcommittee. The next item is the presentation on the 2013 amended and restated development agreement expiration update.
So in front of you, I'm going to try to make this full screen here. Hopefully you guys can see that a little better. As part of the ongoing efforts as the expiration of the 2013 amended and restated development agreement, I wanted to provide the commission, of course, a status update of where we are. There still continues to be a lot of moving parts, but just to note that within this month, next month, you'll begin to see some things come before you for review and consideration for recommendation to town council. So today is just to provide a really high-level assessment or update, rather, on where we are. I've highlighted 6 of those things that are right here before you. The first that we just mentioned, establishing from the town's perspective its own tree preservation landscape standards. I won't dive into it because it's just kind of giving you exactly where we were. We expect, hopefully, by October to have a recommendation come before it for review. The park and parcels remaining. So within the development agreement, there are a number of open space parcels of residual lands that has a requirement that they should be conveyed to another party. Most of that party is the community association. And so as part of that, today we have the first set of those parcels coming for rezoning. Today they're zoned technically R2. As Ocean Park has been developed, we have not corrected those open space parcels. And so those open space parcels that remain, we want to essentially correct the zoning and marry them to what they should be, our Parks and Recreation zoning district. Included in that are other open space marshlands. You might have heard the Community Association referencing in the previous several meetings about open space and marshlands. We're just waiting on to have that conversation to confirm exactly all of those conveyances have happened in their to their entity. And once those occur, we can bring those for if they require rezoning. Some of them are already open space, designated PR. The ones that are for you. And I'll go back. Since this is on the agenda today, I'll go into a little bit more detail later in the agenda. The next 2 are strictly regarding the development agreement, and today, addition of base zoning districts within the code is what the title is. Our development agreement defines mixed-use zoning within the development code. We want to ensure that as this expires, those same standards are applicable to our zoning code, just to make sure that they're consistent. And so what's been recommended that will come before you is that we establish base zoning districts that are exactly the same standards that are within the development agreement today, so that there is no inconsistency to once that document expires. And so that would allow us to essentially have the current uses for those parcels developed to ensure that we aren't creating non-conforming uses.
A question on this, because this came up in our comprehensive plan workshop, so I'm a little confused. Are you talking about things like that are already mixed use, like some of the resort properties, or are you talking about some lands that are not currently developed. I would think that we would do like we're doing with Ocean Park, where they're currently open space and we're rezoning. If it's appropriate to rezone specific parcels to mixed use, we will do that. I'm not sure that we want to add base zoning district, mixed use zoning to the zoning code. I think we'd need to have more information of what lots we're specifically talking about.
Yeah, and I didn't include that as far as today, because today was really a high level to show you that what else. But to go a little bit further in what you're referencing, I'll give you an example. So the Timbers parcel that's been developed already, that parcel is a mixed-use zoning district. And so as part of that, once the development agreement expires, parcel 13, there are a number of others that we just want, Riverview, Little Point, The Point, all those parcels that are on the western edge that are technically mixed-use zoned by our development agreement, we just want to ensure the consistency within our zoning code. So we're not asking to change what's allowed on those parcels. We just want to ensure that the zoning standards are consistently applied to within our zoning code.
So it'll be plat specific. You're going to say
So we're
Riverview is
going to
be...
identify specific parcels that are being rezoned to these categories.
Okay, so it's not a blanket change to our zoning rules.
So when I say blanket change, these will be new zoning categories, but we are applying these categories to specific parcels.
Just those 5.
So I didn't list them all, but yes.
Because didn't we just talk about maybe we shouldn't have new mixed-use zoning codes in our code? We didn't want to have mixed, we want to do it on a case-by-case basis, and would this get around what we had just talked about? I'm
But
not
if we,
sure.
if we did it on a mixed, case-by-case basis, we would still have to come up with, if we agreed hypothetically, then we would have a mixed use, we'd have to have a zoning code that it would apply. Mixed-use zoning code.
I would add that this is a case-by-case basis because we are applying it to specific parcels.
Right.
So did I see, Mr. Farrell, you had a comment?
No, I think it's good.
Okay. The next bullet is the Kiawah Island Architecture Review Board. As you know, representatives of Town Council, Representative Kika Board have formed a joint task force to complete the efforts and assess what might be the new formation, structure, all those nuances connected to the Kiawah Island Architecture Review Board. And so that's continuing to move forward. That's been an independent process of planning department, but once that advances and some recommendations come from that committee or task force, if that requires the town establishing its own architecture review board or some other metric, then we'll have more information on whether or not the commission will need to make any decisions or recommendations as part of that. The last two there are references to specific ordinances. Ordinance 2013-14 is within our zoning code, and that essentially connects the development agreement to the zoning code. And so once that development agreement does expire, this is just ensuring that we clean up everything to ensure consistency and that there isn't anything that was in the development agreement that's not in the development agreement that we would want connected or vice versa. So that's sort of the last step of this whole process. Even though you see the signed ordinance there listed, sort of the last stage in all of these things coming before approval. The signed ordinance there is that we do not have a signed ordinance within our zoning code. So just as we're establishing tree preservation and landscape standards, in addition to that, we want to do a signed ordinance that's not as pressing as tree preservation today, and so we'll eventually roll that in for approval to come before, but that's just an additional ordinance that we want to include as part of our zoning code as the development agreement expires. Are there questions, Ms. Hennessy?
Yeah, I'm still struggling over the zoning. Once the development agreement expires, everything goes back to the town's current zoning class. It goes back to town zoning. So if there's a current use that is non-conforming, that's okay. It will continue to be non-conforming. But the base zoning on that won't necessarily be changed. I guess I'm going to have to look into this a little more.
So what I'll add here is that and Joe, if you want to add anything, you can. One of the things that, as part of the expiration of the development agreement, where it spells out in Exhibit 13.2 those specific use standards, that is not an apples-to-apples translation in our zoning code. And so we want to make an apples-to-apples translation into our zoning code that allows, so whatever that.
I don't necessarily want, if 13.2, once the DA expires, 13.2 is done. And we may or may not want to allow the, anything that hasn't been developed into the new zone.
No. So properties today that are mixed-use zone that have been developed, we want to apply that they are mixed use. So in our zoning category, and for example, if we were to look at the Riverview development or Little Rabbit, today those are R2/C. So as part of this process, the commission can come back and rezone those properties to as they have been developed, which would be staff's recommendation as R2, because those have been developed as R2 properties. Those that have been developed as mixed use, officially mixed use, like the Cape has been a mixed use parcel, we would want to rezone that to mixed use as that's being essentially a developed parcel. So it's not, I think, changing the zoning, it's just ensuring that the language is consistent, that how that parcel was developed and what it is today, so that there is consistency.
John, just one question. You mentioned the planning department's involved in the ARB review.
No.
I'm sorry, I thought, okay, I misunderstood you.
I said it was sort of independent. That task force is driving the community's involvement with the reiteration of whatever that might be. Yeah, there was an update yesterday at Town Council from Mr. Belt on the status of that. Any other questions?
Some of the community tree ordinances, put it in with the tree and landscaping.
So we were urged to get some tree preservation on the books as soon as we can. So that was the reason why pulling the tree preservation as soon as we can. If the subcommittee wants to recommend pulling in signage to that while we do that, that's totally fine. But we wanted to expedite the tree preservation sooner than later. But, others?
Hey, John, do you happen to know, before we leave the podium, do you happen to know what the, I guess, terminal point is for the town and KICA for their outcome for the ARB disposition? Are they due to release something in the next month or so, or is it going to be closer to December? And Madeline, maybe you want to weigh in.
Yeah, I'd be happy, John. Do you want to speak to a term?
Yeah, you can weigh in. You're on that task force, so you can weigh in.
Yeah, come December, there's got to be some kind of decision made, but like all other deadlines, it's not absolutely hard and fast. I think that there can be adjustments made at nauseam. Right now, this summer, the group, which is comprised of 8 people, has been meeting in subgroups, and so one of the subgroups that I'm on was tasked with examining various different compositions to what a new or a revised ARB might look like. And those, to answer your question directly, Lou, those will probably be presented to the community pretty soon. We struggled with it. You can imagine the kind of complexity that we had to take a hard look at. And now putting it in front of the entire committee, the entire work group, is the last step before we bring it out to the community. The other subgroup that's been meeting and is meeting again tomorrow is one that is benchmarking several other comparable gated communities and how they have approached their ARBs and trying to make a determination on which of those might be best suited to our needs. So it's a lot of information collection, again, with a lot of complexity that's being taken into account. I will say that I have been extremely impressed with the work ethic of these groups and the amount of work that's been done over the summer. But now that we're all coming back on the island, I think we'll get a whole lot closer to being ready to present it to the community. And then, because this is such an open-ended question, we're really looking for community feedback. So you look at the documents that have been already put out there, and I'm happy to forward on any other documents that you can't gain access to easily. If it's been put out there for public consumption, I'm happy to provide those to you. But it is a function that is so important to the community that we really want everybody, as many people who are interested, we want their feedback.
So if I may, I have one follow-up question. It's specific that's been asked of me and I couldn't answer it. So today, when you go for ARB approval and you submit your fee, the fee goes to the developer, and then after a year or so, you get the money back from the developer. What will happen? Where will the money go after December the 3rd or whenever? Will it still go to the developer? Will it go to the town? Will it go to KIC into some trust? Or who manages that trust? If you know that answer.
I don't, but you raise a particularly interesting issue. That's the entire fee structure. And that has been hotly debated. And where it ends up landing and what the disposition of those fees will be and who controls them and manages them, I don't know yet. And there's still a lot that needs to be worked. We're still in negotiations or in meetings with the developer. So there still will be additional work that needs to be done in case what we propose is just not at all acceptable, then they have the right to just not accept it.
I just want to share one thing. The town right now would not be receiving those funds at the expiration of the DA. But I think Ms. Kay being on the task force, she's willing to take those questions and concerns back to that group that they can further vet that.
Madeline, this is Andy. The last, I guess, the summary the task force or group put out on next steps indicated that they were going to have discussions with the partners regarding their future plans, which hadn't taken place at that point. Do you know if those discussions have taken place by now?
I don't, Andy, because it just hasn't been communicated, and I am not one of the people who is negotiating or meeting with the partners. So I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that, but it's a good question. Let me get the update on both yours and Luke's questions.
Okay, because obviously it's important to know what the partners plan to do with the ARB before we decide to do something different. And the progression here has been, our next step is to take our best recommendation to the partners and let them react to that. And that is the piece that hasn't been finalized yet. That's for review by the full workforce first. Then I think we're going to get, then I think that is going to go to the partners for them to say either we like what you're thinking about and it appears to be an acceptable approach, or perhaps there'll be just a total refusal of what we have proposed, and then it's back to the drawing board. Look forward to it coming out.
So do I. It's been a really, really interesting learning experience. I didn't think I was going to have to work this hard when I retire.
Thank you, Madeline. John, any other further comments on that? Okay, if that's the case, we'll move on to new business, and the first agenda item is the urban growth boundary. John?
Yeah, so today is a request that the Planning Commission support a resolution in support of the urban growth boundary. And I'll walk through what this all entails and sort of next steps and how this has been brought forth in front of you. In April of this year, you may recall that I introduced the concept to the Commission of understanding what the urban growth boundary is and how that impacts now Kiowa. For the last 2 years at our annual town council retreats, this idea of beyond the gates has been resurfacing continually. And the idea is that Kiowa as a community should be paying attention a little bit more closely in detail of what happens beyond the front gates. And so there are a number of initiatives or a number of projects that have transpired, what I'm calling off-island, that have called our attention. But this effort is not necessarily connected to one individual project, but a greater initiative that's being recommended that the town embark on so that we become a greater partner in growth management for the region. So historically, Kiowa utilizes principally 2 methods of growth management, which is our traditional zoning districts. And for Kiowa, we being unique with having executed development agreements, those with spelled out entitlements, which have granted us the ability to essentially restrict development in a way that traditional zoning does not allow. And so beyond that, we know that this year development agreement is expiring, but I wanted to also show you that in addition to those 2 tools, there are a number of other things that communities embark on to help with growth management. And so whereas you may have overlay zoning districts, development agreements, this idea that our region, the Tri-County region, Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester, particularly Charleston County's urban growth boundary, that's been the planning tool that the Charleston County government has used as its principal tool to help manage growth. And so today's effort is for us to understand how we as a town, the community, the town, can be in support of that urban growth boundary. I'll go really fast through this because we went through this in April, but as stated, this is a growth management tool. Essentially, it's a delineation line between urban and suburban development and more rural development areas. And so you're looking at where areas do have infrastructure, do have the capacity to be able to be developed accordingly. When you look at the landscape, I'll show you a few here. This is that urban growth boundary for our region. It transposes essentially everyone knows the Charleston Peninsula there in the center, and then flanks to the north. This is really hard drawing to read here. To the north, to the south, against all the beach communities. And so the unique or weird, however you want to think about it, is the urban growth boundary on the southern end of the county. It goes through Johns Island. And so there's essentially what's being planned as a more urban area of Johns Island and a more rural area of Johns Island. And it's important, as we're recommending staff, that we keep that line hardened as much as we can so that more urban development does not continue to sprawl in areas that it shouldn't be. I've shared this already with you, but this was established in 1999 with Charleston County Comprehensive Plan as part of this process. As part of the comprehensive plan process, like I said, that describes sort of a rural edge. And then areas of more intense development occur within that urban growth boundary, areas of less urban growth, so areas of open space and more low intensity development, those are outside the urban growth boundary. And that helps preserve the character of areas. The unique part here that you'll see here is that everything on this slide here, that purple line represents the urban growth boundary. And this is looking at Maybank Highway and River Road section of, and so everything towards sort of what I'm calling the northern part of that line, that's within the urban growth boundary. So think if you were driving to Charleston and you took River Road driving past the airport, that right side there, driving past the airport, going towards Maybank Highway, where you make that right onto Maybank Highway to go over the bridge, that's all within the urban growth boundary. Areas that are outside the urban growth boundary are areas, Bohaget Road. You can see here on this image going towards the southwest there towards Walmart. Those are all outside of the urban growth boundaries, where lands are more rural. If I go back to this image, you can see that the urban growth boundary includes essentially the beach communities, and more specifically for Kiowa, or within our front door, these are all areas that are within the urban growth boundary. So the town of both Seabrook and Kiowa sit within the urban growth boundary. Freshfields Village, Bohaget Marina, all those future planned developments that we've heard about so far, like Seafields, MUSC, those locations that they've identified, all those sit within the urban growth boundary. Where we are today at Town Hall, that's inside the urban growth boundary. Going further down, Betsy Carrison, the newly Kiowa River development, that's all inside the urban growth boundary. So if all those things are inside, there's an outside component to this. When you look at this image here, you can see to the left of that purple line is really those things outside the urban growth boundary. So if you're leaving Town Hall today and you're going back towards Charleston, on the right side of the road, essentially that's within. On the left side of the road, it's outside of the urban growth boundary. Not necessarily the entire way of Betsy Carrison, but up until you essentially capture Kiowa River. And so this graphic here just shows you the location of the town and town of Seabrook and the town of Kiowa being inside those. So as part of the purpose of today, what I want to reiterate is that this is an opportunity for the town to be more collaborative in our efforts to essentially plan for the future, what happens outside the gates. So a number of meetings have been transpiring in the last several months. Representatives from the town planning staff, Charleston County planning staff, elected officials from the county, elected officials from the town. There's just been a number of meetings occurring, and one of the things that we're trying to do is establish different ways that we can support each other in looking at this more collaboratively. And so this effort of a first step of establishing the town supporting the urban growth boundary is that first step. Beyond that, there are some additional steps that can lead into a little bit more what I call teeth and allow a little bit more movement to ensure that some of these things happen. But the first step is to say, hey, we're willing to be a partner in this. And so that is the first step here in this graphic, is that we're essentially formally saying as a town, we want to formally engage with Charleston County to be more proactive in planning out what this area in front of Kiowa looks like. So today, staff has drafted a resolution that will go before council for approval, but I wanted to bring that before our planning commission to have your support. After this resolution is in place, and the language of that resolution has been provided for you, and you can see in the I'm gonna just read a couple of the details that kind of highlight a little bit of next steps potentially. It requires a lot of collaboration, so nothing will happen. I can't say nothing will happen immediately, but there are some things that can happen immediately, which are working behind the scenes now. The first is encouraging the county to enter into an IGA with the town, and we would hopefully like to include Seabrook, and hopefully like to include the utility providers on the southern end of Johns Island, that we will work together to plan out the urban growth boundary, essentially making it really difficult for that line to move for any one development and keeping it in place. I'll give the example because that was the most recent example. You all know the Bohaget Marina proposal that was just before the town of Seabrook. That particular development sat outside of the urban growth boundary, and so that was a lot of the reason why there was a great deal of opposition for that project. Town council did send a letter to the town of Seabrook stating its opposition because of that reason of it being outside of the urban growth boundary. And so to protect the integrity of the rural areas and keeping development consistent with the patterns of this area, that was an important step, and I think that the community saw that the town is able to now formally engage with Charleston County to say, how can we further advance this? After intergovernmental agreement is potentially reached, what we can then do is look at specific policies regarding development. And this is require a lot more collaboration because you have a lot more stakeholders involved. But some of those conversations have beginning to be had. This concept of an overlay district has been thrown out along Betsy Carson Parkway. Those are the types of things that, from a planning tool, a planning strategy, that allows us to enforce that line, even to a point where some of the ideas of collaborating with the entire region. So if someone wants to be able to move that line, they would have to get approval from all the municipalities. I mean, that might be a far stretch depending on the location, but these are the types of things that we want to be able to have conversation about. So I'll stop there because that's really the gist of the purpose of this resolution. If there are questions, I can entertain those, Mr. Chair.
I have a question before we ask for approval, and that refers to the penultimate paragraph on the first page. How does that affect Orange Tree?
The first paragraph?
Penultimate, next to last on the first page. Does that now give the town the ability to?
So what we would do is essentially saying we're just in support of where the urban growth boundary sits today. This is not saying that we're recommending moving that line. Right now, Orange Hill, as you're referencing, sits outside the urban growth boundary.
But it requires an approved recommendation by the town of Kiowa.
So you're talking about the partner's property on Bohacket Road?
Right.
Yeah.
That would be independent of anything that the town would have any approval state for. Like, they wouldn't have to come before the town for approval of that, of anything that they wanted. That's Charleston County.
I thought it was, well, the way I'm reading this, it says basically anything that's proposed for development in the urban boundary growth or urban growth boundary would be referred to the island for consideration, and it would require our town approval.
No, so this resolution is encouraging, that might be a further step way down the road of if there's a development, particularly in one jurisdiction or the other, that is on that line. This is a hypothetical. This is,
Yeah, no, the list of places you put on there as being included, since and I don't know the answer, since the Orange Tree was basically approved as a planned development quite a while ago, I think it was over 10 years, and now they're modifying it to actually reduce the number of houses and to do certain changes. Would that possibly be included already? Or is that a new one that falls under this proposal?
Is it a low density? What is required for approval outside the urban growth boundary? Is Orange Hill a low enough density that it's not a problem?
It's almost any density.
I want to just make sure I'm understanding your question or concern here. That particular property is outside of the urban growth boundary, but what we're asking today would not necessarily influence anything that particular property, it going through their approval process of how they want to develop that property. What we're proposing today does not impact that.
What I'm saying, John, is that the proposal for Orange Tree is essentially no different than the proposal for the marina at Seabrook. Now, I don't know if
Let me ask you a different question then. Are you asking that the town should look at influencing what happens on that property because of the urban growth boundary?
Yeah.
So that, like I said, that would be a potential future policy that we could consider, but that's not a step that we're asking today. So, for example, the town did take a position on the Bohacket Marina project because it was outside of urban growth boundary. That particular project already has entitlement, so I think that's a different request, and they're actually reducing. But if there was a different project outside of the urban growth boundary that was not consistent with what you felt that should be, I think this sets us up for the ability to have a conversation, say, hey, the town can or should take a position.
So if for any reason the town council decided to disapprove the Orange Tree development and recommend that to the county as a result of this agreement, it could do so.
The town could take a position today on Orange Hill. I mean, like I said, that's independent of what this is asking. If the town wanted to take a position on any project
And
outside
having
of
already
this,
taken a position on the marina, are they somewhat committed to stand by their decision to enforce the boundary?
I can't speak for council, but I think council, the idea today is that they would evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. And so I think in this particular case with Bohica Marina, that is the front door or right across the street. So I think those were taken into consideration.
Well, do you think it's a risk to the partners to propose the Orange, well, not to propose, but to complete the Orange Tree development without understanding what the town wants in the way of approval?
I don't see a connection between
Yeah,
what we are
I think it's
today.
outside of what we have on our agenda today, which is support
Well,
of the boundary.
If this gives the town the ability to disapprove a development,
This does not
Orange
give
Tree
the town the
specifically.
ability, this does not give the ability to town
Does
to
it-
approve or disapprove a project.
approved recommendation by the town of Kiowa.
Can you reference which section you're reading from?
You're reading from the resolution, the second
Reading
last
from the
paragraph.
resolution.
The whereas, the second last whereas.
Whereas the town encourages Charleston County government to enter into a mutual intergovernmental agreement to strengthen the location of the UGB, deterring its relocation for any single proposed development or without notification, consultation, and approved recommendation by the town of Kiowa Island. So that, I'll just expand on what the intent there is behind that section. The intent there is for, if there is a development, this gives the opportunity for us through a mutual agreement with the county that says, hey, county, if you get a proposal that is inconsistent with the urban growth boundary and that interpretation of its, we would like for you to notify the town and have our recommendation as part of that process. So we're not approving the project. We just want to be
No, I'm
a
not
partner to
saying-
the player.
I'm not saying you are.
This just acts just like an amicus brief. All it is, we're just showing our support for maintaining the urban growth boundary.
Is there, well, that, and there's a risk that we cross swords with the partners
Maybe,
over approval.
maybe,
No, more than maybe.
okay.
And if-
Hypothetically,
If we want a little, if we want a little support in making proposals regarding the ARB, we may want to use it. I don't think that's the intent of the resolution. I think the intent of the resolution is to support the urban boundary. If the county develops, and wants to develop something outside of it, we can claim we don't want it, or we can be silent about it. But we don't have to go on the record and say we have to approve it.
well, I guess we'll vote as to whether we're going to bring this to, recommended for approval by the town council. The town council can accept it, then they can make that decision, Andy.
I agree.
I make a motion that we accept
Any other
this
comments before we move forward? I need a motion
I so move that we
for
accept this.
support of this
for
and a
support of the
second.
resolution.
Second?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval? And opposed?
No.
Okay, got one no. Okay, thank you. John, move ahead to our next new business, which is the comprehensive plan future land use map amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our next agenda item, I've introduced somewhat already during our presentation of the amended 2013 amended and restated development agreement. And so today are 3 parcels which are now located all in Ocean Park for requesting to be rezoned. We'll start with the future land use map. In this particular case, the TMS numbers for these are 207-00-00040, 265-16-00159, 265-16-00160. These are all currently zoned identified as medium density residential in our future land use map. And we would like to request that they move to the active recreation and open space. As part of this particular process, we know that the future land use designations are in connection to our comprehensive plan, but essentially this sets the ground work of essentially how future developments would come online. And so that future land use map sets the stage of what developments are on a particular parcel. So I stated all of these are located in Ocean Park. They're actually owned by 2 different entities, one being the Ocean Park Homeowners Association, the other being the Kiawah Island Community Association. These are 3 parcels, one approximately 5 acres, one approximately 11 acres, and the third approximately 2 acres. Here are those 3 parcels. One at the far east end of the island, which is the second to largest, and then the one in the center, the largest, and then the one at the far west end. That is the actual 2-acre that's been conveyed to the community association. So the larger 2 are been conveyed to the homeowners association for Ocean Park. That smaller 2-acre parcel has been conveyed to the community association. So here is that community association parcel. If you have been out to Ocean Park recently or have historically, you know that there's a sand shell air parking area. That's essentially that parcel that we're referencing today. It's attached to the lagoon there. It is connected to the greater bike network, as the other parcels are as well. Here are just a few images captured. There is a bridge that carries over the lagoon there. That bottom right image is the parking area that was just referenced. Here again, the second parcel.
Was that PGA parking, just so we get our bearing? Was that part of?
No, it's always been there.
Okay.
So you can't see my cursor here, but if you want to flip around to the big screen, Joanne, that across the way would have been that staging area for PGA Park, where all of the trailers were there.
And is that one of the future open space that we're
So
going to
that
talk
is
about?
actually owned by the resort, so it's not part of the development agreement, this development agreement. There's a few more images. Like I said, you probably won't be able to recognize exactly where these images are because it's all open space. And they all have this sort of center lagoon. So look from different vantage points, you could look like you're in the same position. Here is that furthest one towards the end. Again, it is a lagoon there, and it's connected to the greater bike network. Some additional images. So medium density residential future land use category.
I wouldn't do that.
This provides and promotes medium density development, and this is what that current designation is. This district can accommodate patio homes, zero lot line homes, comparable neighborhood of what this looks like today. Our cottage, Night-Heron Cottages or Inlet Cove, those are our R2 residential zoning districts. What's being recommended is that this go to active recreation and open space. And so this particular development would marry to essentially our park system or our open space category, Night-Heron Park, the tennis center, all those areas which provide facilities, recreational facilities. Our golf courses are a part of this category as well.
John, I have a question. If that transition is made, then are residential units no longer acceptable within that parcel? Is it an either or is it a both?
So with the rezoning of this parcel, that would change the standards that would be allowed. And so today, the development agreement based on Ocean Park category, this is parcel 43 within the development agreement. Essentially, all those lots have been subdivided already as part of that parcel within the development agreement. And so those residential entitlements have been fulfilled. And so to answer your question, yes, these particular parcels won't be able to be developed based on the number of entitlements that would have been remaining for Ocean Park.
So just to clarify, there will not be additional residential units built there. It will just be parkland or recreational use?
Correct. For these parcels considered today, these will be open space,
Okay.
park space, yes.
Okay.
So here is a image of our future land use map. That category in yellow to the far east end is sort of where we are, and I'm going to zoom in on a second. But everything that you see in that light green color is our active recreation and open space. So it's a substantial part of the island, our golf courses, open spaces, all of the whole lagoon network. Those are the categories in our active recreation and open space. And then so if you would imagine essentially the areas that we're in question now, and those lagoon spaces, essentially that's what we're requesting, that those lagoon spaces be converted to open space, parks and recreation zoning district alike. So the one parcel that I highlight here today that you see on this is the parcel that Ms. Hennessy referenced, which is the open space to the north, sort of west here, that first open space parcel. That is not owned by the Kiowa Partners, but that's actually owned by the golfers. So I have my cursor here on the big screen. I'm sorry that those who are online can't see that, or joining via Zoom can't see that. I don't know if you see that, my hand, that's the parcel that I'm referencing there that is owned by the golf resort. The remaining open space parcels here, 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 and here are all the parcels that will eventually will come before you. We're doing the first three today because those are already been cleaned up and conveyed. The remaining are still having some work to be done. I'll show you on the actual rezoning the larger parcel so that you can see what else kind of needs to be cleaned up for those other parcels to come before you. But the area
Is there a downside, John, to making that transfer?
No, I mean, the more open space categories that are out there, the better from staff's recommendation. I've talked with Kiowa Partner representatives, and they support that these spaces go to this particular zoning designation because essentially those entitlements have been used already for Ocean Park. So there aren't any remaining new lots that would be cut out of this particular area.
And the third property is all lagoon for the most.
And pretty much, yeah. And you can see that the whole area is lagoon.
The only area is a small amount of area with the bike path, and
yeah,
the rest of it's lagoon.
So what I will do is just share with you what the recommendation action orders are for the Planning Commission. And this is essentially a majority vote of Planning Commission. For this particular section, we find it consistent. Staff recommends that we do find it consistent with the section of our comprehensive plan. And that's based on 12-157, section 6. And so here you can see what's been provided. This is essentially allowing us to make consistencies with the expiration of the development agreement to ensure that those open spaces that have been conveyed are aligned with our town vision for open space. This particular request is consistent as they have been not developed, for lack of better words, or have been developed or improved. So just a few key factors that staff have provided for you. As stated, this provides greater consistency with the land use patterns. And then also this aligns with the executed dedications that are required by the development agreement. And so as we have more of those occur, you'll see a few more of those come before review. But this is consistent with that. So that's the first application, which is the comprehensive plan amendment. If you, essentially, they run together, but you can take a vote now, or you can wait till I go to the zoning and take a vote for them together.
I say we take them separately. Just do
Okay.
this one now.
Okay.
So as we look to moving those 3 parcels of land from medium-density residential to active recreation and open space, do I have a motion for approval?
I move.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? John, now you can have your zoning.
Thank you, sir. Here's the zoning request. So same parcels that have been identified. And here we're actually changing the zoning category, which is R2 residential, to our Parks and Recreation zoning district. That's the request. So just for the record, I'll reiterate those TMS numbers: 207-00-00040, 265-16-00160, 265-16-00159. These are all located at the east end of the island, as stated. One of those parcels has been conveyed to the Community Association. The other 2, in size 5 acres and 11 acres, are been conveyed to the Ocean Park Homeowners Association. Here, more precisely, I highlighted those areas in the black, which were in question today. The remaining areas, and that's between those 2 here. This center parcel is connected to residual lands that are part of what I'm calling little marsh islands that are out in the marsh. And so we don't have a clean parcel to bring before you to show that there's a delineation between those. But once we do, we'll be able to say, okay, this is the official TMS number for those parcels, and so that you can have that be rezoned as well. Those, I believe, will be going to the homeowners association. I can't confirm that today, but I believe that those will also go to the homeowners association. The 2-acre park parcel, that's within the development agreement. That was a required carve-out to provide parking spaces at that end of the island, which was conveyed to the community association. Again, here's an aerial, a few images. These are the same images that you've seen already of Ocean Park. What I wanted to do is at least share with you the zoning standards for these R2 zoning district. I want you to think R2 has what I'll share is a range of housing types. So I mentioned Inlet Cove, I've mentioned Night Herring Cottages. The houses that are developed in Ocean Park are also R2. Houses that are in, near the river course and the settlement, those are also been developed as R2, even though they feel like R1, those are zoned R2. And so I just want you to know that single family, attached, detached, those are allowed in the R2 zoning district. So for example, patio homes, townhomes, what Riverview has been developed as, those all sort of fall into a similar like category of R2. Our Parks and Recreation zoning district, the purpose of this is essentially to provide the community with park and recreation facilities. As stated before, this includes all of our golf courses, tennis court areas, whether those areas are used for passive or active recreation.
Quick question, is all of Ocean Park R2?
Yes.
And that's a 2.5-story maximum for single-family homes?
Yeah, 2.5-story, 40 feet.
Boy, any of you been out to the end of the island? There are a couple of really giant houses that look a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, the elevation are a little higher out there, so they do feel like they're towering over you a little bit, but yeah.
But they're 2.5 stories.
But they're 2.5 stories, yeah. The half-story.
Hey, John, who is bringing forth these recommendations? Is that us, or is it the owners of the property?
So the town initiated this, but we've been communicating through this development agreement conversation that we are trying to satisfy all of these things before the end of the year. This has been in conversation with the partners, with the community association, so they're aware that these parcels are being rezoning. But official, if you call applicant, would be the town. Are there other questions? Okay, so just to continue here, again, this is a zoning map amendment, which requires a majority vote of the planning commission, and the approval criteria that's outlined are four criteria, which staff believes that this application meets those criteria. This does take those collection of open space parcels as part of Ocean Park as they have been developed to match our current zoning designations of open space. This is consistent with our comprehensive plan and purposes of those zoning districts. It does provide for the continuation of open space facilities, and this is correcting, or however you want to think about it, is correcting the inconsistency based on the expiration of our development agreement and wanting to ensure that those things occur naturally. Even if this was outside of the development agreement, once we redid our comprehensive plan, our future land use map, this would have been one of the areas that we reviewed, because those have been developed as open space, that we would want to ensure that is designated accordingly. So just again, that same slide, staff does feel that this is consistent, aligns with our comprehensive plan, and it does provide that zoning consistency with how these parcels have been developed. And if there's any other questions, I'll entertain those. But here, I wanted to show you just more in detail the actual parcels. I pulled a plat for these subdivision parcels. The center, I'll start here at the left. This is the 2-acre park parcel that's been conveyed to the community association. You can see it's all connected to this inner lagoon, which is a drainage area for these areas in Ocean Park. And then the second one, which is the larger towards the far east end, the lagoon exists here. This is all part of the drainage area as these lots have been subdivided and come online. There are a lot more, I don't know if you've driven out there recently, but there are a lot more houses being under construction because most of these have been subdivided and ready to go for sale or have been sold. And
Again, so just one more question, John. So these 3 parcels, have they been conveyed to the community association or homeowners association?
Yes.
Or are they still part of they've already been conveyed?
These have already been conveyed.
Great, thank you.
John, what was the comment earlier about the homeowners association assuming responsibility for the maintenance? Was that something you said you couldn't confirm it at this time?
So these, I'll go back to the greater map. What I was confirming is the center, this might not be the best one. Yeah. These particular parcels, I'm unsure if these open spaces, I think the conversation is they will also go to the Ocean Park Community Homeowners Association, but it's just not, I haven't been able to confirm that. So that's the reason why I said I didn't want to comment to the status of those. But
So that's not included in the resolution
that's
at
not
all?
included today.
Okay.
No other questions? Okay, so before us is a request to rezone the subject properties that John referenced. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. John, I'm going to combine the correspondence and council liaison comments. And anything from the town meeting yesterday that we need to be aware of, or any other things?
So I will just be very brief. One is for staff comments. Our marsh management plan is moving a little bit further along, not fast, but we've moved a little inch. Our 3 priorities that have been established, we continue to meet as a work group. Council did approve the next stage based on our agreement with a third-party consultant, Nicole Elko, who actually helped us with the marsh management plan. And so that is to evaluate what happens at the Kiowa River Bridge. The second component to that is as part of the impervious surfaces and surfaces coverage, we're looking at trying to establish a base standard for areas that we can essentially publicize to the community. So one of those I'll give very briefly is what the Ocean Woods neighborhood did as a community, as a collective. They all redid their driveways to the new pervious pavers. And so one of the things that we want to use them as a model to see how we can encourage other whole neighborhoods to kind of do the same thing to change impervious surfaces to those pervious type surfaces. That would be one of the smaller initiatives that comes maybe in October. Rain Gardens is the other staff in the work group are working on producing materials. This is a little bit challenging because we want to encourage if a rain garden helps a property that the homeowner has the right steps that they can take and who that they can contact to help them with that. But it's just because there's purview and review processes for different entities. We would just want to make sure everyone has a.
John, how did our 2 rain gardens handle the rain event we had last week?
I do not have an answer for that. That is a really good question, though. I feel like we can probably get an answer.
That's the purpose we have for it, so we can measure how effective they were.
We have rain gardens in the complex we're in up in Connecticut, and we've had some violent storms, and they've been very effective.
The
There was no community incentive to plant that, was there?
They were actually developed, they were part of the zoning, when planning and zoning approved this development in 2015, it was
made that
part of,
agreement.
they had new zoning rules that because of flooding issues, all water must be maintained on the property that it's developed. So any new development has to show how they're going to hold their water on the property and not impact downstream properties. So they did rain gardens.
But you weren't provided any incentives to do it, were you?
Well, it was, you wouldn't get approved without it, right? No, it was an approval. It was a requirement. Yes, you're right.
The second thing that I'll highlight is Ando West is moving through the approval process. And so next Monday, the 12th, they will be heard for public hearing at Charleston County, 6:30. And so that's continuing to go through the normal approval process for rezoning. The third thing that I'll reference, yesterday, essentially no status has changed with the intersection of Kiowa Island Parkway and Beachwalker Drive in reference to the Kiowa Island real estate building. And so council are still kind of in that same stage of where they are. That update was kind of at the end of the meeting, so people may have logged off. But essentially no changes are kind of where they are today in the establishment and of the acquisition of that particular property. The last thing I'll reference is the town's anniversary. I don't know if you guys have signed up or are coming to the event. As planning commissioners, I know you support the town, but we would love to see you there if you have not. Our communications team would be disappointed if you didn't register, so thank you for that.
Later, when more of us are back on the island.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Any public comments from anything on our agenda today? We thank you for coming. Commissioner comments, and I'll start with Madeline.
I have none.
Luke?
Yeah, I've got one, and it's been a growing concern, and it's got to do with a comprehensive plan. You know, we had a workshop today, and my sense is kind of 2 major things. One is the consultant doesn't really understand the island, the population on the island, what are hot buttons with the island, and then 2, and part of that is he comes from a different place, like, you know, he's thinking more like city of Charleston or maybe even, you know, a different island down south that everybody wants to avoid. So that, and then the word choice he uses does suggest to me an insensitivity or, again, a lack of understanding what the sensitivities on the island are. So I don't know if this is an appropriate venue, but I'd like the chairman to think about maybe forming a subcommittee to edit the documents that we just got, to help with the wordsmithing, the appropriate sensitivity language, the things we should include and shouldn't include, given that we have a little bit better sense of, given the data we have a better sense of what the populace probably wants than he does. So I don't know what to do with that, Bill, but that's just my comment. I'm concerned that we're not moving forward in the right direction that's going to be well received by the public.
I appreciate your comments. I'll talk with John immediately after this meeting, and we'll look at possibly having some volunteers in that subcommittee to look at the wordsmithing and maybe consolidating some of those bullet points. Okay?
And I would be happy to volunteer.
That's one.
But it seemed like there were 3 or 4 or 5 of us were all thinking the same way, saying the same things. And so I think it's not just me, but if it is, then anyway, that's my comments.
Thank you, Luke. Ron?
Nothing to add.
Joanne?
I agree with Luke, and I'm sure we all may volunteer and maybe just divide it up and assign a couple of us to each section, and we come back to the group as a whole with our comments. Thank you.
Andy?
I certainly agree with Luke and all the other comments in support. I have similar feelings as you can gather from my comments today. My biggest concern is, and Luke, I think it may be a bigger island than the one down the road or up the road. I think he's talking consulting talk for a city like Denver or Alexandria, Virginia, or someplace other than us. And not only doesn't he know the island well enough, I don't think he understands the culture of the island, although he talks culture, but I don't think he has any clue what the people of the island think, and he certainly hasn't gotten that from the sessions he's had. We still have to have, and we will get, before we agree on it, at least I hope that's the case, comments from citizens. And he'll hear it then, because hopefully before we get those comments presented, we'll have it in a way and in a form that we agree with, and we can have everybody understand it in that context. So, yeah, I'll vote. I think we all should edit what we see, and we should see it timely in advance of the next meeting from him.
So noted. Larry?
No comments.
Comments? Based on that, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?